My name is Mallory Prescott. I am 34, and I had been married to Trevor for almost 9 years when I found his mistress in his mother's kitchen. I did not find a hotel receipt, hidden message, or second phone. I found Kimberly Rhodes beside Diane at her birthday dinner, cutting cake like she belonged there. I knew Kimberly as someone from Trevor's charity running group. He had mentioned her because she helped organize fundraisers. Nothing more. That night she was wearing the apron Diane always handed me on Thanksgiving, laughing with Trevor's sister, Alyssa, and asking where Diane kept the serving plates. Trevor was in the next room, and when he saw me watching her, he did not look surprised. I asked why Kimberly was there. Diane turned toward me and said she thought I knew Kimberly was coming, then froze. I asked why I would know that, and the kitchen went quiet. Trevor stepped in and told everyone not to turn his mother's birthday into something uncomfortable. That was when my stomach dropped. Trevor was not confused that Kimberly was standing in his mother's kitchen. He was irritated that I was reacting to it. I followed him into the hallway and asked how long she had been spending time with his family without me knowing. Trevor said Kimberly was just a friend who had helped Diane with a fundraiser, and I was reading too much into it. I asked how a casual friend knew Diane's favorite dessert, Alyssa's children by name, and where the family kept dishes I still had to ask about. He ignored every question. Then he looked at me and said, "We have all been trying to make this easier." I stared at him and asked what all meant. Who was included in all? And what were they trying to make easier when I did not even know there was something I was supposed to accept? Trevor glanced toward the kitchen and told me we would talk at home. By then, I understood one thing. Whatever conversation was changing, my marriage had already started. And somehow I was the last person invited into it. I left Diane's house before anyone finished dessert. I did not call Trevor on the drive home, because I knew he would use the silence to prepare another explanation. Alyssa called me, sounding upset with him for letting the birthday become awkward. Then she asked something that made me pull into a parking lot and turn off the engine. She said, "Aren't you two taking space since spring?" I told her no. And for a second I thought I had misheard the question. In spring, Trevor and I had gone to his niece's graduation together, booked an anniversary weekend, and talked about spending more time alone because work had been wearing him down. Alyssa went quiet long enough that I could hear her breathing. Then she told me Trevor had said we had agreed to see other people while we figured things out. That was why she had not questioned Kimberly being at a charity brunch 3 months earlier, a Sunday cookout 2 months later, or the afternoon they helped Diane prepare birthday gifts. I had not been invited to the brunch or cookout because Trevor told me those were family things he wanted to handle alone. Kimberly had not suddenly appeared in Diane's kitchen. She had been introduced in pieces. What hurt most was how ordinary every piece had been made to look. No one had been told, "This is the woman Trevor is seeing while Mallory still thinks they are married in that sense." Each person had been given enough information to make the next appearance seem harmless. I realized Trevor did not need everyone to believe the same story. He only needed each person to believe a version that kept them from asking me anything. I called Trevor and asked one question. "When did you tell your family we were separated?" He said he had never used those exact words, then reminded me that our marriage had been struggling for months. I told him struggling was not the same as agreeing that someone else could enter our family life. He said I was making it bigger than it was. But by then I understood the story about my marriage changed depending on who Trevor was talking to. The next afternoon, Diane came to see me because she thought I had misunderstood what happened at her birthday. She said Trevor had told her months earlier that I wanted some distance, but I was not ready to make anything public. According to Diane, he said I needed privacy because of my job, our families, and the holidays. She believed she was respecting me by not asking questions. I asked her one thing. If I was the person asking to leave, why had Trevor taken me to look at a cabin the week before for our anniversary weekend? Diane stared at me, then asked what cabin I meant. Trevor had never mentioned it to her. That was the first time I saw her confidence in his version start to crack. Later, I called Alyssa and asked her to repeat exactly what Trevor had told her. Her answer was different. She said Trevor told her we had mutually agreed to take space and that neither of us would object if the other person started seeing someone, as long as it stayed private. Diane had been told I wanted out. Alyssa had been told we both agreed. I still did not call Kimberly. I was not trying to build a case against Trevor or collect people on my side. I wanted to understand what my marriage sounded like when I was not in the room. The more I asked, the clearer something became. Trevor never gave anyone enough information to challenge him. He gave each person only the piece that made the next thing seem reasonable. Diane believed she was protecting my privacy, while Alyssa believed she was respecting an agreement I had never made. Meanwhile, Trevor was still coming home and saying we could fix things if I stopped pressuring him while he was stressed. 3 people were living inside 3 versions of the same marriage, and only one of us had no idea any version besides mine existed. That night, I stopped asking whether Trevor had lied. I started asking how many different truths he had handed out. I wondered how long he thought those stories could stay separated. More importantly, I wondered what would happen when the people who believed them finally started talking to each other. Kimberly messaged me 2 days later. She did not begin with an apology or ask me to understand her side. She asked if I would meet her because she needed to know whether she had stepped into a marriage different from what Trevor described. I agreed because I wanted facts, not another argument about who had been hurt more. We met at a coffee shop. Kimberly sat down, wrapped her hands around her cup, and asked one question first. When did you know your marriage was over? I told her I had not known it was over until the week of Diane's birthday. And Trevor did not ask for a divorce until days after that dinner. Kimberly stared at me silently. Trevor had told her our marriage had been finished for almost 10 months, and that I was delaying the paperwork because I did not want our families to know. He had also told her I knew about their relationship, even if I did not want to meet her. That was why she never thought she was walking into Diane's kitchen behind my back. Then she explained how slowly Trevor had brought her into the family. The first time, she was someone from the charity running group helping with a fundraiser. The second time, Diane seemed to understand that Trevor and Kimberly were seeing each other. So Kimberly assumed Trevor had told the truth about our separation. By the time Alyssa invited her to Sunday brunch, Kimberly believed the awkward part had already happened elsewhere. I told her what those months had looked like from my side. Trevor came home every night, attended events with me, signed cards with both our names, and talked about an anniversary trip because we needed time together. He kept saying work had made him distant and that I should stop pushing him while he figured himself out. Kimberly looked down at the table and said quietly, "He told me you had already let him go." I did not tell her she was foolish for believing him. I said Trevor had given each of us a version that made our behavior feel reasonable. She picked up her phone and called him before leaving. Her first question was simple. "When you brought me around your family, what exactly did you tell them I was?" Trevor called me that evening and said I needed to stop talking to his family and to Kimberly. He said I was turning something private into a public humiliation and making everyone choose sides. I told him I was not asking anyone to choose anything. They were simply comparing what he had told them. A few days later, Trevor and I met with Eric Whitman, the mediator we had agreed to use while we figured out the divorce. Trevor said our marriage had been over emotionally for months, long before Kimberly became serious. Eric asked when we had actually agreed that we were separated. I said we never had, while Trevor first said March, then changed it to sometime earlier in the spring. Diane joined part of the conversation because Trevor wanted her to confirm that she already knew we were having problems. She said Trevor had told her I was the one asking for space and that I did not want the separation discussed publicly. Alyssa then said she had been told something different, that Trevor and I had mutually agreed to take space and could see other people. Neither story matched the life I had been living at home. Kimberly was not part of the mediation, but Trevor had already received her message saying she believed our marriage had been over for nearly 10 months before their relationship began. For the first time, those versions were no longer sitting safely inside separate conversations. Trevor tried to explain that he had used different words because each person needed a different amount of information. Eric asked whether the difference was really about wording when each version named someone different as the person who ended the marriage. Trevor said he had only been trying to protect me from embarrassment. Diane asked why protecting me required telling her that I wanted to leave. Alyssa asked why he had told her we had agreed to date other people if he believed I was not ready to know about Kimberly. Trevor kept answering one question with another explanation. Nobody shouted. Nobody walked out. But the room changed because Trevor was no longer the only person explaining what everyone else supposedly knew. For the first time, Diane and Alyssa stopped looking at him for the answer and started looking at each other. I stayed quiet because there was nothing else left to explain. Kimberly did not end things with Trevor after she met me. She went back to him with questions and wanted answers that were not shaped for someone else. She asked why he brought her around Diane and Alyssa if I still believed we were trying to save our marriage. Trevor said he only wanted everyone to adjust gradually because appearing later with a stranger would hurt the family. That answer changed something for her. Kimberly asked whether he had introduced her slowly so his mother and sister would like her before the affair became public. Trevor said she was twisting his intentions and making it sound calculated. She asked him, "When you brought me around your family, was I someone you loved? Or a situation you were training them to accept?" He called that unfair. Kimberly said unfair was entering those rooms believing everyone understood who she was while I was still his wife. She thought Diane accepted her because my marriage was already over. Instead, Diane accepted her because Trevor told her one story, while Alyssa had been given another. Kimberly ended the relationship after that. She did not call me, and we did not become friends. Alyssa told me Trevor was furious that people questioned things he once explained and moved past. What surprised me was that I did not feel victorious. Inside the family, things changed. Diane stopped saying marriage is complicated whenever Trevor tried to excuse himself. Alyssa apologized for inviting Kimberly to brunch because she believed I had agreed. I told her I understood she had not meant to help him, but that did not make the feeling disappear. Trevor blamed me for making his mother and sister see him as a liar. I told him I had not created any version they heard. I had not told Diane I wanted separation, and I had not told Alyssa we were free to date other people. I was simply the only person who had never received one of his explanations. That was the consequence he seemed least prepared for. People stopped accepting his first version just because he sounded certain. When Trevor explained something, Diane and Alyssa began asking whether I knew the same thing. He had spent months making everyone comfortable with his story, and now none of them were comfortable taking his word alone. Trevor asked to speak to me alone after we agreed the divorce would move forward. He said he had been unhappy, and I could not act as if our marriage had been fine because I did not know about Kimberly. I told him I knew we had problems, but problems were not the same as deciding the marriage was over. He said I should have understood where things were heading. Then he said he had been trying to make the transition less painful. I asked why that required telling Diane I wanted space, telling Alyssa we could see other people, and telling Kimberly our marriage had ended months earlier. Trevor said each person needed information. I told him every version made someone else responsible for his choice. That was when I understood what he wanted. He did not only want to leave me. He wanted to leave without becoming the person who had left. His mother could believe I asked for distance. His sister could believe we agreed. And Kimberly could believe she arrived after everything was finished. Trevor said he never meant to replace me. I told him replacement did not need an announcement. It happened when another woman learned his family traditions, chose his mother's gifts, joined brunch, and stood in a kitchen where I thought I belonged. He had been making room for her while telling me we were still trying. He said he wanted everyone to adjust slowly because the truth would hurt. I told him that was what he refused to understand. He had not been preparing people for the end of our marriage. He had been preparing them to accept what he was doing before I knew it. Trevor said he never wanted to hurt me. I told him, "No, you did not want to be responsible for hurting me." That was why every version placed the decision somewhere else. He had nothing ready to say. I did not need him to admit he was cruel or give me one apology. I only needed to stop calling months of deliberate choices a misunderstanding. When I left, I knew the marriage was over. He no longer owned the story of how it ended. After the divorce, the hardest part was not missing Trevor. It was realizing how much of my life had been built around his family. Their dinners, their birthdays, their holidays, and the routines I once thought would always include me. Diane still sent birthday messages, and Alyssa checked in sometimes. I appreciated that, but I stopped trying to hold on to every relationship exactly as it had been. I understood they had not set out to betray me. I also understood that knowing their intentions did not erase what it felt like to watch Kimberly step into spaces I had treated as home. I did not want to spend the next year proving I still belonged there. I wanted to find out what my life looked like when belonging did not depend on Trevor. I started seeing Monica more often, even when it meant driving across town after work. I joined a Thursday night ceramics class because I wanted one place where nobody knew me as Trevor's wife, Diane's daughter-in-law, or Alyssa's sister-in-law. I accepted a weekend trip with friends without checking the Dalton family calendar first. None of those choices looked dramatic, but they felt new. The first Thanksgiving after the divorce, I did not go to Diane's house. I invited Monica, my cousin, 2 people from ceramics, and a coworker who had moved to town. We crowded around my table, ate too much, and stayed long after dinner was finished. For the first time in years, every person in the room was there because of a connection that belonged to me. I looked around that table and understood something I had avoided for a long time. Losing Trevor's family did not mean I had lost half my life. It meant I had spent too much of my life living inside someone else's circle and calling that permanence. If you have ever realized how much of yourself disappeared inside a relationship, tell me in the comments. And share, and subscribe for more stories about finding your way back.